Hello everyone, this week we are going to review the topic Good Therapy and Treatment Planning. Let's start with this picture. Most of us, and I think probably all of us, when we look at this picture, we probably see the Mona Lisa painting. Although if you pay close attention, the picture that we have here, the details, the structure that we have here, it's not exactly the Mona Lisa picture or painting. But our brain can recognize the patterns and the familiar patterns that we've seen, in our lives. And because of that, when we see the picture here, immediately we recognize that this is Mona Lisa painting, right? I'm sharing this picture and this slide with you because I think that what we do as family therapists, it's similar to this whole concept. We want to recognize the patterns. We want to see the familiar patterns, what's going on in a system. And we want to bring up those patterns and what's going on, bring up it in a session and, share them with our clients. So when they are in a situation, hopefully, after, some sessions in therapy, they will be able to step out of the situation, look at the cycle, the situation from a systemic perspective and with a diverse lens and perspective. And they realize that what's going on, what are some patterns that they see in the cycle. And then they can go back with some sort of insight, skills, interventions, and they can change the cycle and the situation. As therapists, we always want to be competent and confident. And because of that, it's really important to talk about the 5 steps to competent therapy and really the important aspects of a good therapy. So the first one is practicing and mapping the territory, which is about conceptualizing the situation based on your theory of choice. As we start practicing, in our field, we usually, practice conceptualizations in different shapes and forms. But yeah, as you move forward on your academic journey and you're becoming a great therapist, it's really important to focus on conceptualizing based on a specific theory. And even like taking one step back, thinking about your epistemology, modern and postmodern epistemology and what you think about human beings, their strengths, change, the reality, the truth, or big truths, quote unquote, all these different things, and then what feels comfortable to you, what fits the best for you, right? And then after that, based on your theory of choice, practicing to conceptualize the story and the case that you're working on it, right? So if you work from narrative perspective or solution-focused therapy or EFT, all these different approaches, they have different concepts and they have a kind of like filter of seeing the world and the situation and the dynamic and the problem and the goals and the interventions, all these different things. And it's really important for you to focus when you practice a theory, when you learn about the theory, to focus on how you can conceptualize a case with that specific theory. One of the things that I usually suggest to my supervisors and students is to have a case example, vignette, and then have the same one for all these different theories and just practice different theories with that same scenario or vignette and see if you can conceptualize the case differently when you learn about a new theory in a class or just on your journey. So the second step is about identifying OISs and obstacles, assessing the client's mental status and provide case management. It's really about identifying the strengths and the challenges that you see in a session and that you see with a client's story. Some of the strengths that could be helpful and could be helpful on this journey of change and the new experience that they are going to have in therapy, and some of the challenges that might be in a way of progress or improvement in therapy. The third step is about selecting a path, developing a treatment plan with therapeutic tasks, including how to build a working therapeutic relationship and measurable client goals. Usually this is something that we all have learned, in our professional experience and academic journey. One of the things that sometimes, in my experience, we tend to forget is checking the things that we see and we believe with clients. So if I'm working with a family and I'm pretty much sure that if I use XYZ interventions, it could be helpful. And if we have XYZ goals, it makes a lot of sense because they're talking about these different issues or complaints. Sometimes we forget to check those things with the clients, and that is really a big problem. So always remember that it's about your clients, it's not about you. So whatever you have in mind, check those things with clients, see if the goals that you are thinking about or they're talking about, if those things, make a summary of them to them and see if that's what they meant, if that makes sense. If you even like give them a homework, a task, ask them if it's like doable for them. Again, paying attention to the systemic perspective and the diversity and the power dynamic in the room, right? Sometimes we have all these different things in mind and we have no idea about the family situation, the privileges that they have and they don't have, right? So always like a simple question such as, is that doable for you? Does that seem reasonable? How do you feel about that, right? It would be super helpful. And when you look at it like that, when you ask those questions, you're also working on your therapeutic relationship and alliance with clients. The fourth step is about tracking progress. I usually do this on like each session that I have with my clients, even like if it's the second session, I usually check with them how they feel, how they think about last session, how did it go, how was the last week, whatever the frequency or the gap is about. How did it go? What do you think about the last conversation that we had? If I gave them any sort of homework or task, I usually ask, how did it go? What was challenging? What was, interesting to you? Did it like seem easy, doable? All of these different questions, because when you ask good questions in therapy is all about good questions and observations. So when you ask good questions, no matter what the answer is, it's a lot of information for you as a therapist. So just pay attention to the dynamic and the client's reflection, because it's super important and it's all about connection at the end of the day, right? The last step is about living a trial, so documenting what happens, and I think that this is one of the things that we always talk about in therapy and in the formal, even like the formal steps that we need to do. I think that you may hear this a lot, but when you document your session, try to be as detailed as you can and try to I know that sometimes it's not super fun and it takes patience, but try to document everything that happened in the session, the things that you observed and the dynamic, and sometimes obviously if you ask questions about safety and all those different things, because it's super important. Remember that it's not about you, it's about clients. This sentence is super helpful in many different situations when we are talking about the 5 steps that we just talked about. When a lot of my supervisors or students ask me questions about what is right or wrong in a session, a lot of times the students ask me if it's okay to cry with the clients in a session. Is it okay if we get emotional in a session? And sometimes the response or the answer to those questions is start with, it's not about you, it's about clients. So if you get emotional, you're a human being, that's fine, but it's like their sessions, it's not your session. So the session should not become your therapy session. And if that's fine, everything is okay. If you think that you are crying to the point that you start talking about your stories and your trauma and what happened to you in the past, and it's been like 20 minutes that you're talking about that, or you cannot, that the status that you're experiencing, it's preventing you from having a good clinical judgment, then it is not okay. So I really like that sentence in general. It's not about you, it's about clients. Always remember that in many different contexts and situations. I have a case example here for you. At this point of the video, you can pause and read the scenario and the vignette. And I want you to, based on a theory that it's your choice, something that you feel comfortable with so far, see if you can have some reflection on the 5 steps that you see here about this case. If you have some questions, if one of these steps they seem more challenging, if you have any reflection or questions or thoughts about the challenges with systemic perspective and diversity about this case, just think about it. Take 5 minutes and think about it, and let me know if you have any questions. Esther Perel has this podcast called Where Should We Begin? Probably most of you are familiar with it, but it's very interesting. It's real therapy sessions, a short part of it, with couples, and I really recommend it if you haven't listened to it so far. I think that with theory and theories, you can listen to these podcasts and think about the way that she conceptualize different cases and different stories. Pay attention to her approach, the details, the good questions that she has most of the time, and see if you have any questions, any comments, any reflection, any part of it that seems challenging to you, and think about what would you do if you were the therapist there. I share one episode here with you. You can search and find a link and listen to it in your own time. But what I'm going to do is just play a short part of it for this slide. It's about a couple, same-sex couple. They're both in their 20s, and they're talking about some of the issues that they have in this relationship. I just want to play one part that Esther Perel is talking about the relationship. If you have listened to this before, awesome. If not, you can go and listen to it so you have the full context. But even like without the context, I think that it's helpful to listen to her and see how she conceptualized the case and talk and think about what's going on in their relationship.
Is that each of you says yes, but. I've now waited 3 times. Yes, but. You want him to become more responsible so that you don't have to feel so responsible for him, but he won't become more responsible because you're always there. And he's trying to tell you, let me find my own threshold, and that is way too anxiety producing for you. You want him to trust you, but then you act in a way that doesn't allow him to trust you, because every time he has to step in because you didn't do what you said you were going to do. So if you try to say, I will change when you do, it will sound nice, but it won't be effective.
No, it doesn't work. It's a vicious circle.
So the best way you have is to say what you can do. Part of the anxiety about does he know where to stop is slightly related to how he acts, and part of it comes because you have decades of that as your marker. There will be the challenge of accepting that he has a different threshold, which in part is why you picked him in the first place. He's looser, he's more open to the world, he's more what you call people pleaser, he's more trusting in that way.
Yes, that's accurate.
And those are the very things that probably drew you to him, but they also are scary for you. And this is the law of attraction. What is initially attractive because it's different is also the source of conflict later because it is different. You wished when you had your mom that you didn't have to be that responsible all the time and be the one who thinks about her limits, so that you could be the child who goes and explores and does and plays and discovers and makes mistakes, rather than you be the studious kid who never breaks a single rule because she does all of that. And part of your reaction to him is that, you both are the responsible children. But as a result, he became more constrained and you became more like, I do all the right things, I'm entitled to some fun.
That's basically how I see it. I'm just hoping that we would change sort of at the same rhythm.
So I pause at this time, but you can, as I mentioned, go and listen to the whole episode and have some reflection time for yourself. I think that it could be really helpful. No matter what you choose for your theory, there are some competencies that we want to practice all the time, no matter how many years we have had experience in therapy or as a therapist, if we are a new therapist or a seasoned therapist. These things, these competencies, they are lifelong journeys, and we should always be mindful of them and have a plan to work on them and improve them. I think that you have heard of some of these competencies before on your academic journey, but let's just review them, shortly and see if there's something that you have questions or you have comments about. So the first one is about diversity and multicultural competence. We always want to promote diversity and that multicultural perspective in our sessions with our clients. I want to highlight the difference between cultural competency and cultural humility. Cultural competency is when you have the knowledge about different cultures and different beliefs. You are aware of that. You are respectful of that. You know something about this culture, that belief, this belief, right? And you want to be respectful about all these differences. Cultural humility is about the fact that there's always something that we don't know, right? So it's about curiosity, that we stay curious in our sessions with our clients, and we do not assume that we are the expert of their lives, right? So we are curious and we ask questions instead of going with our own assumptions. And the goal in therapy is cultural humility and not cultural competency. The other thing that I want to highlight about this competency, diversity and multicultural competence, is about the fact that sometimes the multicultural perspective that we get training in or we practice, it becomes racist and sexist and all those different words itself. What do I mean by that? What I mean is sometimes what we learn is that there are all these different cultures, religions, beliefs, and we read about them, we study about them, and then when we have a client from that population, we go to a session with all of those assumptions and biases, and then it's the client's job to explain what's going on and to prove themselves, or try to put themselves out of a category or box because of what we have in mind about multicultural, what we see from a multicultural perspective, or multicultural training that we had. So what I mean by that is when we learn about all these different cultures and when we learn about diversity and asking questions and everything, again, like we should know that when we go to a session with clients, it's their sessions, it's about them, it's not about us. It's not their job to, again, like what happens, have that mirror of what's going on in our society. Again, like in our sessions, that in our society there are all these different assumptions and biases and beliefs about them because they're from a specific nationality or religion or whatever, sexuality or whatever. And then again, what happens in society, it happens in our sessions again, that they need to prove themselves, or they need to explain themselves, or they need to try to separate themselves from the general assumptions. So just be mindful of that. That should not happen in our sessions, and we should practice more cultural humility. The second competence is about research and the evidence-based practice. So we always want to practice based on science, and science means that the theory or whatever that we are practicing, intervention, whatever we are saying, it's evidence-based. It's just not something that we say, hey, it makes sense, or it's common sense. The next one is about ethics. Obviously, we always want to practice from an ethical perspective, and be mindful of the recent changes, which is recently it's a lot, and just ask questions and do not practice and work in isolation. Always consult and know that you're not alone, and you can ask questions. Even like seasoned therapists, they also encounter situations that they ask for help and consult. It's always the best when you ask for help. The last one is about person of the therapist, and in your, again, like academic journey, in different courses that you have, in theories class, in different theories that you learn, it's really important to focus on this person of the therapist, what you feel, what is your reaction to a theory, what you feel about a theory. Does it feel uncomfortable? Does it feel comfortable? Does it seem a good fit for you? How do you feel about the concepts that a theory has? And all these different reflections and questions that you should ask yourself when you study and practice a theory. At this point, I want you to pause and think about the competencies that we just reviewed. Which competency seems more challenging to you, and why? What is your plan in order to work on it? Sometimes you can ask questions in supervision. You can work on it in there. There are all these different conferences, workshop. What fits, again, like best for you? So just reflect on it, think about it, and let me know if you have any questions. When we work with clients, we conceptualize the case or the story that we are hearing. We try to have assessment, and we have a treatment plan. We provide a treatment plan. Dr. Gayhart explains all these different things and concepts and the treatment plan in her book very well. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is try to have a systemic perspective when you think about all these different concepts. It's not like that they are not linear, right? So it's not like that you do the conceptualization, you're done with that, absolutely done. Then you go with the assessment, you're absolutely done. And then you provide a treatment plan and you are, absolutely done with that as well. Your treatment plan would affect your assessment and conceptualization. And as you move forward, you may have a new kind of like perspective where you conceptualize a case in a different way. And then it would affect your assessment, and your intervention could be a sort of assessment, right? So have a systemic perspective when you think about all these different concepts and when you think about treatment plan in your work. So when you work on treatment plan, sometimes based on the site that you're working at, they give you a template, or if you have your own private practice, you can come up with one. But a good treatment plan should have introduction, goals and interventions, treatment tasks, diversity consideration. It should be obviously evidence-based, and you should always consider client's perspective and ask for that in your sessions. I'm going to talk about goals in a second, but the one thing that I want to highlight on this slide is client's perspective, and asking for what their thoughts, their reflection, how they feel comfortable, how something seems or is doable for them, and not working harder than clients when you think and when you talk about treatment plan. It's always important to have a good pace, and by good pace I mean a pace that is comfortable for you and for your clients in therapy, and check those things with them as you move forward with therapy and have your sessions. You have probably heard about SMART goals, and I just wanted to have this slide on this lecture because I think the reminder could be helpful. When you set up goals with clients, it's important that you try to have SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And again, like going back to the previous slide, it's really important to include client's perspective and have that diversity consideration when you work on all these different things. If your recommendation, the goal that you think that would be reasonable for therapy is that your client should have should practice meditation, let's say 5 times a day and 7 days a week, and your client is dealing with chronic illness and they have financial issues, that goal may not seem realistic and achievable. So when you have something in mind, and when you are doing your treatment plan and setting the goals with clients, a lot of times clients may not feel the power to ask or suggest something. So it's always our job to bring up conversations and ask different questions, and be curious and see if the things that we're talking about, if they make sense, if they seem doable, achievable, and if clients feel comfortable with them. They say practice what you preach, right? So talking about all these different things, just think about yourself. If you were going to go to therapy, what are some of the considerations that you would like your therapist have in mind in your sessions? And is there any difference if you were the client, or you and your partner were the clients, or you and your family were the clients, right? So what if you and your family were in therapy together? Those considerations, would them be different? Would they be different, or do you still have the same expectations? Just think about those things and see how the dynamic and the different perspective and aspects could impact a session or considerations. When you want to learn about all these different theories, which in the beginning they just seem a lot of information, and some of them they seem very similar, and some of them they seem very different, and sometimes you feel confused, and all those different things, they can be very normal. As you move forward and practice more and learn more about all these different things, you feel more comfortable with all these different theories and the one that you're going to choose for yourself. But one of the things that I found very helpful in my professional experience about learning theories is the practice of asking questions. So you're going to learn all these different theories, and when you study them, when you learn about them, ask yourself what stood out to you, what seemed challenging, what kind of reactions, emotions were provoked in you. When you learn about all these different concepts or interventions, were you pleasantly surprised? Were you shocked? Were you annoyed? What kind of emotions or reactions did you have? What past memory or story did you remember, if any? Sometimes some of these theories and the concepts that they have and how they highlight one aspect of seeing stories and reality, sometimes they can be triggering. Sometimes they're not triggering, but they lead us to see what happened to us from a different perspective. Next question could be, did the theory seem a good fit to you? Why not? Sometimes a theory could be very evidence-based, very strong, but for some reasons you don't feel comfortable with it. There's no wrong or right about that. Rather, it's about the reflection and the awareness that you have about that. Why do you think that's the case? Which part of it does not feel, comfortable for you? The next question is about, what are your concerns or critiques about this theory? Do you have any concerns using this theory or recommending this theory to someone? And if yes, what are some of those, reflection or comments? And as I mentioned earlier, I think it's always helpful to have a vignette scenario, and then practice that scenario, the same scenario, with all these different theories that you're going to learn. Try to practice the different concepts, interventions, how they see the problem, how they conceptualize the problem, the goals, the interventions. And I think it's very helpful because you have the same scenario and vignette, but the way that you are looking at them, or at least you are trying to look at them, could be very different. And then it brings up the challenges, the things that are interesting to you, and all these different aspects of it. Thank you for listening to this short lecture, and I hope that the lecture provokes some thoughts or comments in you. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know, and I hope that you have a great day.